So here's the bottom line. Some surahs have a pretty interesting story behind them. Not every surah. Not every surah has a story behind it, or a story that we know of for sure. Some surahs we know a story for sure. So Surah Al-Fath, for example, surah number 48 of the Quran, has a pretty elaborate story. You can call it the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. You familiar with the incident? Right? That if you don't understand the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, you're going to have a hard time understanding surah number what? 48. You need like a really good study of the entire treaty, every little detail, before you get to Allah's commentary on that treaty. That's important. So, first, or Surah At-Tawbah is at the occasion, the 9th surah is at the occasion of the conquest of Makkah. So if you don't know what's happening with the Romans, if you don't know what's happening with the Meccans, you don't know what's happening between, Ali radiallahu anhu and Abu Bakr as-Siddiq on their trip to Hajj and all of these details, if you don't know that, you're going to miss out on what Allah is talking about in Surah At-Tawbah. Some surahs have a pretty elaborate historical story behind them, and you better know. You better have a full picture of what's going on. We're actually entering a really interesting surah from that perspective. We're going to be studying Surah Al-Kahf, right? Now what's remarkable about Surah Al-Kahf, there are many things, many narrations about Surah Al-Kahf. We're going to explore a bunch of them together, inshallah. But one of them that's really fascinating is that the Prophet ﷺ was asked certain quiz questions to see if he's really a prophet. And he was asked about who the people of the cave are. Right? Now the people of the cave, I'll let you know now, I'll give you a little hint now. The people of the cave are actually considered saints in Jacobite Christianity, in Syrian Christianity of the time. They were considered saints. They were believed to have been discovered 120 or so years before the coming of the Prophet ﷺ. I'll give you the full notes later. Relax, just listen for now. Okay? So this was a pretty big deal among the Christian community of the entire region. And the news spread so far that the Christian king from far off, like from Greece, actually came to pay them respects when they were discovered, according to their records. This is not the Islamic record, this is the Christian record. And they were such a big deal that for the last 100 or so years, this is before the birth of the Prophet ﷺ, there were songs made about them in Greek. And then the Greeks basically completely took over the story, and it was lost on the Arabs, the Arab Christians. And about 2 years before the Prophet was born, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a Christian monk actually translated the Greek songs back into Arabic and Aramaic so the Christians could sing the songs of the priests. There are to this day churches that have murals of the 7 sleepers of the cave. They have festivals every year. This was a very big deal to the Christian community. Now, if you don't know what they believe about the people of the cave, I mean, we have some idea they have a story. We have some idea. If you don't go into the details of what the Christians had, what they knew about the people of the cave, what they believed about them, what songs were they singing? I'd like to know. What songs were they singing? Why was that a big deal to them? And then if you understand that history, then you look at Allah's commentary on the people of the cave. Guess what happens? You're just left in shock, like, whoa, Allah is commenting with such accuracy on a story that is not even owned by the Muslims. It's owned by who? The Christians, and not even the average Christian, the scholars among the Christians. And Allah is correcting their story for them. Allah is correcting their story for them. Now, if you don't know that history, you won't know that there's anything to compare it to. So you'll just read the history on its own, the story on its own, which is great. But man, if you study the historical context, it brings out some cool stuff, man. You just sit there and read that and you go, whoa, that was awesome. That is awesome, Just to, get your appetite whet a little bit, because that's coming later. They believe that these young men who were caught in the cave, who had a dog with them according to them too, they got caught. They weren't able to stay asleep. They got caught. They tried to hide in a cave, but the king caught them. He caught up with them. And then he buried them alive. He just had rocks put on the mouth of the cave and just buried them alive. And so they died. Then 40 years, or assumed dead. Then 40 years later, not 309, 40 years later, some shepherd came and moved some rocks, and he found these guys in there, and they woke up. And that was the whole story to them. Is that the story you have in the Quran? No. See, the Quran, it comes to the defense of the actual events of those people, because those people are Muslims, which is also important. Because to them, those people were actually saints of Christianity. They preached Jesus is Lord, which they didn't. So Allah corrects the records, sets the record straight. Okay, so but we'll see more about that. In other words, what I'm trying to say is, when you talk about historical context, sometimes you have to go to the Islamic sources to understand the historical context, but sometimes you have to go outside the Islamic sources to understand the historical context. But understand my thought process. I am not going to non-Muslim sources, to Christian sources, to Jewish sources. Yes, I will go to Jewish sources too. I'll even go to Egyptian sources. I don't care. But I'm not going to go there to find truth. I'm going to go there to find what they have, to see how Allah comments on what they have. It's like in my method, what's beyond criticism? Quran. Everything else is subject to criticism. You know where I found this commentary on the people of the cave? One of my students pointed me towards it. Is a book written on the Quran and its biblical subtext. And the intent of the author is very interesting. The intent of the author, he's a disbeliever, of course, he's a non-Muslim. The intent of the author is that the Quran copied stories from Christian and Jewish tradition, but did so unsuccessfully. In other words, it didn't copy the story accurately. That's the intent with which he did exhaustive research. And I'm really grateful that he did that research, because I'm just looking at all of his research and I'm reverse engineering it and saying, yes, the Quran is completely in contradiction with the record that you have, because the Quran set the record straight. We're looking at the same exact research, but we're looking at it from two different perspectives. I'm looking at the Quran as muhaymin. The Quran comes and protects the truth of what happens before, what may have happened before. You understand? So that's about historical context. So this will be important for some surahs, especially for Surah Al-Kahf. This is really, really important. Actually, the first story in Surah Al-Kahf sets the tone for the rest of the surah, as far as I'm concerned. Okay. So that's A. Is that clear? A? We're good? I guess we're not going to finish this today. Okay.